Welcome to What Matters, Water, TV, and Podcast. Today, we're going to dig into water storage in the Sites Reservoir in the Sacramento Valley and why it's so crucial to the entire state, especially as we face this severe water crisis with our historic drought. I'm Charlie Wilson, your host. In just a moment, we're going to talk to four expert leaders about one of the most critical topics affecting our state right now, the need for new and strategic dams and reservoirs. There have been many discussions lately about Sites Reservoir and its potential to help us store more water for when it's needed most. We're going to break that down with what this project is, how it works, and how it's part of California's water grid, why it's such a vital project for our future. So let's get at it. Two of our guests today join us from Northern California. Jerry Brown. No, not that Jerry Brown. This Jerry Brown's the executive director of the Sites Project Authority, the organization tasked with building Sites Reservoir. Also with us from beautiful Sacramento Valley, we have Frederick Fritz Durst. Fritz is a sixth-generation grain farmer and board chair of the Sites Project Authority. Now, representing Southern California, we have Heather Dyer, who's the general manager of the San Bernardino Valley Water District and a returning guest to our show. And we're also delighted to have back Adel Haji-Khalil. He's the general manager of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, the nation's largest wholesaler serving more than 19 million people. I think you'll find these four bring a passion, enthusiasm, and ingenuity to tackle the genuine, pressing issues of climate change impacts on California's water supply. So Fritz, Heather, Jerry, and Adele, thanks for being with us on What Matters. We get a chance to talk a little bit today, and I really want to kind of get into it, the importance of storage and where water storage sort of fits into this, what can be obviously a kind of a complex matrix, people trying to understand sort of how all these pieces fit together. And as you guys all know, we sort of talk within the Water Coalition. We talk about that all the above strategy, and we sort of try to piece it apart then. Today, I really want to kind of talk about the water grid. I want to talk about how the grid works. I want to talk about the importance of storage. And then I want to kind of drill down, maybe take an example of a project that's sort of hanging on the horizon here and an opportunity and kind of get your take on all of that. So I want to start, if I can, Adele, sort of from your perspective at Metropolitan. Sure, let's just kind of frame it up for me. Where does storage fit as part of that, all the above, or, your one water matrix? How does that play in terms of being able to serve a really vast area like Southern California?
So thank you, and great to be with you all. Storage is one of the anchors of one water. We are, if you really look at our water management over the years, snowpack has been the anchor for how we manage water in our region. And we relied a lot on snowpack as a way to store water in the snow and slowly melts down to serve our rivers and reservoirs, during the summer when we need the water, but during the winter, it basically builds that storage. With the climate change and the hotter and drier days, we are seeing basically climate change in action, where the snowpack is no longer reliable, it's no longer there. And we saw clearly last year and this year, it changed. Last year, we had 90% of normal in the snowpack, both in the Sierras that brings water from Northern California, and in the Rockies that brings water through the Colorado River. And both systems, 90% of normal snowpack turned into 30% of runoff. And that's not sustainable. And now we look at what happened this year. In December, in the Sierras, we had, I think December, we had 165% of normal on the snowpack. And then forward to January, February and March and April now, and it's down to 35% of normal. The snow is evaporating, the melting is happening faster than ever and soaking into the ground before it makes it to our riverway. So what we need is what I say is new chapters in our water playbook. And those chapters, you heard me talk about conservation, but we can't conserve our way out of what we're dealing with. Local water supply, it's critical. Groundwater remediation, but most importantly, storage and connecting the system together. So storage is really what I call our replacement or our response to the snowpack. We need to store water when we have it and use it when we don't. And that's really the bottom line is you need to take, and this is like I tell people, like when I was talking to folks, it's the same as your own personal bank account. You have your checking account and you have your savings account. Your checking account is the income coming to you. And your saving account is your storage. So as your income is getting less and less, you're tapping into your savings account more and more. And the more you have savings, the longer you can survive. And that's really, it's just, I tell people, it's just as simple as that is we need the savings accounts everywhere. Diversify your investments, diversify everything. So when we have less income, less water coming to us, drier days, drier years, we can tap into that savings that would help us recover. So I see it as an essential element on what we do. Heather and I talked about it, about really how we collaborate to look at the groundwater basins and storing water when we have it, how we can build surface water storage, how we can, Diamond Valley Lake and Lake in Hammett. For me, that was the eye opener for me as to say, that's when people were thinking ahead to put a storage that's saving us right now during the day. So it's just, to me, it's the savings account for our water future. So that's what storage is all about.
See, now, Adele, you just killed my financial plan. Now I get that big bonus. You're saying I can't go out and buy that fancy car. I got to put that into savings because someday it's going to get a little lean again.
Exactly true.
Well, let me ask Jerry. I mean, with your role at Sites, and we talk a lot about the need for physical investment in storage. I mean, and they all kind of work together. Again, it's a sort of a big statewide matrix that not a lot of people in Southern California really understand. But as we're sort of sitting here, as Adele described, in the middle of this, what's now, every time we go through this, it's an unprecedented drought. I know you've spoken, I've heard you speak about Sites really being a drought tool. So explain to me, as a surface storage project that's sort of out there as an opportunity, walk us through a little bit about how you describe this as a drought savings tool, part of that savings account that Adele made the analogy over.
Sure, Charlie, and thanks for having me, and thanks for making me part of this esteemed panel. I really appreciate it, and it's an important topic for your listeners and all of us in California to be better educated on, and it's great that you're providing a platform for that kind of message and information to be shared. Sites Reservoir is to be located in the North State. And I like to say it's strategically located, and it's very natural because, of course, we're taking advantage of the topography of the area, but it's strategically located in almost exactly the right spot that we need in order to work compatibly with our existing water management system. So much of our natural and developed system are stressed and will continue to be stressed as our climate continues to change over the years, and we need to take steps in order to prepare ourselves for those changes and adapt to those changes. And Sites Reservoir does that. It will take water from the Sacramento River during excess periods of flow in the river. These are periods where there could be flooding circumstances in the Sacramento Valley, large amounts of flow going through the Sacramento River and down into and out of the Delta into the ocean. These are the periods we need to optimize those supplies for our uses within California, and Sites Reservoir would provide us a place to put that water. So we'll take the water, we'll put it into this off-stream impoundment that will reserve this water and save it for us as kind of an insurance policy to be used during those drier periods when the flows in the river and in the delta are less, and when our systems are very stressed. And we'll put that water back into the river during those periods of time, thereby helping the aquatic species, the fish, serving the needs of farms and families across the state. And the location, I think, to me, is so strategically important and valuable to all of us across the state that it just happens to be there, and it happens to be available to us, and we need to make this investment in order to prepare for our future.
Well, that kind of takes me, Heather, jump in here for a second, because I know that you have been, again, as you're a state water contractor like Metropolitan, and we've talked about this before, but as Jerry just described, I don't think you can emphasize this enough, that the historic, that rear view mirror, as Adele described, we always had snowpack. That was our storage account. We would get heavy snowpack, slow runoff. It would bleed, melt, run into the rivers and estuaries. And that was what kind of gave us that timeliness over a period of time to get through hot summer months. But now we get it almost like tidal waves. It comes rapidly, heavy, but as rainfall. So I'm trying to visualize like this wave that literally runs from the hills kind of down across the state into and out to the ocean, that if you don't capture that wave or pieces of that wave, you're really just constantly dry. So that feels like sort of where we are today. We had, multiple years of dry. We had a couple years where we had a lot of snow and some rain. And here we are, another 2-3 years of really dry, but we hadn't really captured anything of significant new storage. If we had a facility like Sites, a surface storage facility like Sites, where would we be today had we made that investment, knowing Jerry and Fritz have been working on this thing for many years?
I was going to say, Charlie, that's a little bit of salt in the wounds there.
But that's my job. I got to be real, Heather. Yeah. It's like, okay, this would have been nice to have had done, back in the 80s, but even Diamond Lake took 20 years to build.
Yes. I mean, I believe that the analysis has shown that we would have had 1 million extra acre feet of water this year. And that's huge. That's huge for the entire state of California. And you're right in that. So the climate modeling shows that it's not necessarily that we will have less water in the system in the future. It's just that it models that it will be coming in a different pattern than we have historically seen. We will get larger, flashier storms, these atmospheric rivers in the south, we call them the Pineapple Express. They come in, they dump a ton of water at one time. And then we have extended periods of drought in between those wet years, or even like this year, wet events. We didn't even get a whole wet year, but we had a couple wet events. We need to be fundamentally changing how we manage water, how our facilities are built, so that we can maximize those wet periods, capture as much of that water as we can, and get it into a storage facility, whether it's above ground like Sites, whether it's below ground like our groundwater basin in the San Bernardino Valley. Capture that water when it's wet, put it in our savings account, figure out the connections between ourselves so that we can help our neighbor, we can share those resources. An important part that I like to emphasize is that I view California as one integrated system. Not just with the water facilities. We are a highly integrated system in water from the north to the south, but we are also integrated in our financial and our economic systems. The economic drivers of the south, the economic drivers of the Central Valley and Northern California agriculture industries, they are all linked. And so by working together on these big solutions that are very difficult, by helping out the ag industry, by helping out the urban and coastal areas that put a tremendous amount of money into our economy, that's helping all of us. as Californians. And so for me, it's very hard to pull it apart and kind of piecemeal it out, because really it is all linked, and we need to be working on these big solutions. Like you said, we've got to be looking at how do we manage water in the future for this changing condition that we have not historically managed for. And so that's really what this is all about, sites. I think it's a big, idea that people think, wow, are they ever going to get this done? And we are going to get it done. But I will tell you, I'm pretty sure I've never heard a water manager who said, wow, I wish we wouldn't have built that storage facility. So no matter how hard it is, we're going to push this across the line.
Adele, I mean, you kind of started the conversation on storage, mentioning Diamond Valley. What difference would a facility like a Sites Reservoir have made in how Metropolitan is currently managing through this dry cycle?
As you know, we just declared the first time ever a drought emergency conservation plan, where we said that we're not going to have the water for 6 million people in our service area that's dependent on the state water project if we don't cut by 35% our water use. That's about 150,000 acre feet. So just I think what Heather just said is if we had that project, that would have stored 1 billion acre feet this year. We could have avoided this problem that we're dealing with right now by just 135,000 acre feet. So to me, this could have been, this is really what we're talking about. People forget that we started the year in 2020 and 2021 with 3.5 million acre feet of storage in the metro, and for Met, whether it's in Lake Mead, Diamond Valley Lake, and upstream in the system. And that's what's saving us. This is really, we're tapping into the savings account. But the problem we have also is that some of our storage that we have is not able to move around. And that's another area that I think Heather mentioned, is how we can connect and move water around. So that the plumbing is a critical element of what we do, where we all have to look at this management of water holistically. And I think this is exactly, we need to create a balanced, holistic, integrated way of managing water where we are in balance between urban use, farming industries, and the environment. And if we are not doing it, this is on us. So I agree. It's all about what I told the governor. One Water California is my new theme for him and for all of us. So, but where no one is left behind. And I will talk more about it, but I think we need to make sure that no one is left behind. And this is, whether it's the environment, whether it's the farmers, whether it's the urban users, we should not do anything. The tribes, all of us have to be together and making sure everybody's taken care of. And that only can happen when we work together, right? And I'm optimistic that we will do that. And I think that's really the pathway to doing the things that we need to do, such as sites and other projects that we need to really push forward and build with collaboration with everyone.
Well, Fritz, you've been very patient sitting there. It's rare that a Central Valley farmer gets together with Southern California urban interests to try to build any kind of project. Tell me a little bit, as the chairman of the Sites JPA, tell me, what is it going to take? You've been at this a long time, and I know you've been working literally in the fields trying to cultivate support to get this project up and running. What is it going to take from your perspective? What kind of challenges are you still confronted with, recognizing you guys have been at this a long time?
Well, I think what it's going to take, we might already have it. And the key word is partnership. This project is very unique. There's none other like it. And that is because we've always gone with the philosophy of beneficiary pays. So other projects, one entity owns it and operates it exclusively for that organization. But this is both folks from all throughout the state of California. As you've heard Adele and Heather speak from Southern California, we have Northern California agricultural water districts. We have people from the San Francisco region that are participating in this project. And we didn't go ask the government for a handout. We have decided that we are going to pay for our own project here. And on that note as well, there's a huge benefit to the environment from this project. Right now, it's about 17% of the water will be for the environment. And the state of California, through Proposition 1, has purchased that block of storage. So California, for once, is going to have its own block of water that it can use to manage however it deems necessary. And we in Northern California, we see this project as benefiting us in many ways. Not only will it provide us with a more reliable supply, but right now what happens when we get in the drought years is they come to our region and ask us to fallow land and then move that water to other regions. And every time we fallow, it weakens our industries here, primarily the rice industry. And the rice industry has been shouted out by many environmental groups because we provide not only food for humans, but we provide food for wildlife, for fish, for birds, and for other species. So it's going to help us because we can continue helping the environment with our crops, but we can also help the environment with a block of water. And in the past, some judge has, through some lawsuit, has slapped the gavel and says X amount of water needs to go in this region, every year under these conditions. And as you're hearing, this climate change is really throwing a wrench in the machine. We really don't know what's going to be coming from month to month, much less year to year. And this project's going to help us to retime that water, which is going to be critical. So it's going to add water in terms of molecules of water because of the reservoir, but because of its ability to connect in the river systems and retime water, we are going to make the use of water far more efficient. And we're doing it without neglecting the environment. It's really important.
Well, that's a perfect segue. And Jerry, I want to kind of pull back to you as the executive directors. In doing what Fritz has described, when you're looking, in the rear view mirror, sort of how water projects have been done in the past, we had sponsors, we went out, solicited funding, we sort of did what we had to do, to meet certain, thresholds, and then project got built. But along the way, the reason that took a long, long time is because we had then people that came to the table and said, yeah, I don't think that's such a great idea. And then they would throw roadblocks. So this issue of community, I'll call it stakeholder engagement and stakeholder involvement, not that everybody needs to agree, but as you described, there's nonprofits, there's environmental groups, there's tribal organizations, there's water customers, business, industry, agriculture, and there's a lot of people that literally feed off of these kinds of investments. Describe for me a little bit about the importance of that community engagement and helping to sort of move that along, kind of, and where you're at as the professional that's sort of held accountable by your board of directors. Like, okay, so what have you done for me lately, and where are we, and how come we haven't gotten over that hurdle yet?
We are governed by a 9-member JPA, and primarily the local irrigation districts and water districts. Within that structure, there's also the 23 investor utilities that are represented and have a say. And among that body, they have made it very clear to me that community engagement, outreach with NGOs and tribal interests, and bringing people together, taking a collaborative approach to implementation of the project as opposed to a combative approach is the direction of this board. And we as a staff take that very seriously. Just as an example, over the past year and a half, we've had over 40 meetings with outreach meetings with NGO groups, environmental groups, conservation groups, tribal interests, various parties to, number one, communicate what the project is and make sure that people understand what we're trying to do, and making sure that people have information so that they can make up their minds about what is important to them about this project. And then number two, learning ourselves about those interests and issues and concerns that others have and seeking to address those as part of the project. And there's been some substantial adjustments in the design and the planning of the project. Diversion criteria, bypass flows. When do we actually take water in a safe manner, responsible manner to protect the fishery and the river? There's been significant adjustment to those criteria, to those considerations that have, in a lot of ways, weakened the performance of the project and eroded some of the benefits of the project. But the board has clearly said, no, this is important to us. We need to not only make an investment to improve our water supply, we have to make an investment to improve our environment and improve the situation for many other stakeholders across California. And we'll do that. We'll take a hit in the performance of the project so that we can accomplish these other things for these other interest groups. And so it is supremely important to this board. And I'm asked often, is this project ever really going to get built? And I always say, I'm 100% confident this project will be built. It must be built. It has come time to where we have to build this as part of our water management system. But the most important thing is that we have to do this together, just like Adele said. This has to be done in a way that it serves all of California. It can't just be for one community over another community. There can't be winners and losers in this. There has to be a one collaboration around this project. And that's our mission, and that's our focus as we go forward with implementation.
Well, Adele, I mean, this kind of speaks right to your wheelhouse about One Water, and, in the way, and Fritz, I'm going to come to you next, because, you've got, farming interests, and then you get metropolitan, both sort of participating in this. How important, and what do you see, Adele, as that community stakeholder? What are the important pieces that need to still kind of come into place in order to take that next step forward and actually move to implementation? We can get beyond just the conversation, but actually, I'll use the term, from a previous Jerry Brown. Sometimes we got to build some, and I'll fill in a different word, stuff. He used a slightly different word, but how does this community stakeholder, other than having conversation, can we get to a place from your perspective that you get over that hurdle and say, okay, we have enough support that generally gets this done, or are we going to, work towards perfection, which is, really, really slow and arduous? So
I'm going to just use the term trust. We can only move at the speed of trust. And to me, there's a lot of trust to be built. And you really start thinking, and this is when I start looking into sites, and I went and did a visit to sites, and I understood what it means. I was surprised that the environmental community are not really behind it all the way. So I've had discussions with some of the folks that are not supporting sites. And my first question is, I just don't understand why you are not supporting sites. And the answer is, we don't trust. We don't trust A, B, C, D, the people. It's all about trusting government. Right? We don't trust that you'll do what you say you want to do. So the issue is trust. And I think we have a problem of trust. So what we need to do is, what assurances we can put in place to ensure that there is the assurance that the water will be available to the environment, and who would make the decision on the water being released to the environment, and when and how. And to me, the time to talk about it is now. I know we focus on building the project, but I think at the same time, we should talk about how we operate the project. What are the operating conditions to taking the water in? during, Jerry talked about excess flow. What conditions can we do? Because you don't want to take water during dry flows, right? And let's define what the excess flow is for the intake. Let's talk about how you take water out. Who would govern the percentage or the block of water for the environment? Maybe it's not Fish and Wildlife. It's not the state of California. Maybe there is a governance that can be established that can provide that trust, right? So maybe we should be talking more about the operating processes and the guarantees now, because those are critical to trusting. Because there really, I think, is an issue of trust, and we need to work through it. And the way you do it is through putting the issues on the table and finding ways to rebuild that trust. So I really, in the discussion we had at our board a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think, on the sites continuing the funding for planning, there was a lot of discussion about, from our environmental partners and others about it. But the bottom line, what I really stress is the need to have everyone at the table. And we need to be at the table advocating for fair, equitable use of that water, and not building it and changing our minds tomorrow, right? So let's figure out how we can talk about it, how we can address the issues of the tribes that are being impacted, the community benefits. I talk about community benefits as a critical element of what we do. We need to ensure that what we're doing is helping the communities in the area that are being impacted. That, so to me, we need to build the trust, sit down and find out what are some of the concerns. I feel that we're going to build this project, but I think what we need to do is build the relationships first before we build the project. And that's, to me, is critical. And I think I can come and help with this as much as I can. There's some tough decisions that we've made. I believe that we can really help the environment, because one thing that we always don't forget about it is that there is a flood risk downstream on the Sacramento River. And also the habitat and everything could be washed out if we don't have a way of capturing that massive runoff coming down. So it's a kind of a win-win for everybody. And if we can make it right, where we put the conditions in place that are codified as a condition, and let's figure out how we can get it done, I think there's a path forward. But I think we need to make sure that everybody is at the table, and we should have the discussions now, not after we build it. Discussions have to happen now to build the trust first before we build the project.
Well, it's a great segue, Fritz. I mean, it's as we talk about this, the speed of trust, to coin a Covey phrase. You're the Central Valley farmer. You grow a lot of great things that people need, eat, and it sounds like if we get you to set the table and bring the produce, we'll have Adele do the cooking, and together we've established some form of trust. Is that literally sitting around the table having a meal? I got to ask you the question. So we have so many of these, in our politics today that have become these bumper sticker slogans, where it's easy to throw out blame those people versus those people. And, for the longest time, the urban and the ag was sort of hurl these insults back and forth of, those people are just, using all these things and we don't get our share. And if they would do things differently, then we'd all be, we'd have what we need. How do you see that issue of trust being established in then the eventual operation of a facility like Sites?
Thanks, Charlie. Hey, I think Adele just did a wonderful job of talking about trust, and that's been critical. I mean, it started with our JPA. We had to learn to trust one another, because in the beginning, we all had different sorts of water supplies, and there was some finger pointing. They're those with and we are without, and we overcame that. And in Northern California, we have taken on the slogan that we're part of the fix, not the fight. And we no longer have the trust issues that were once in this valley about Northern California versus Southern California. It's about us. It's not about them, or it's about all of us. And that's that partnership I referred to earlier. And what's really difficult, I think, for the environmental community to grasp is the fact that sites, when you become a participant in sites, you're going to get a certain percentage of the reservoir space. So basically, you're going to get a canteen of a certain size. Okay. So the question is what are you going to do with that water in that canteen? Starting with, when are you going to put water into the canteen? So that's kind of what Jerry was referring to about bypass flows. When do we go to the river and take it off? So you're hiking and your canteen's getting low and you come across some water, but it's maybe helping some of the environment right there, some birds. Maybe, do you fill your canteen or do you bypass and go on? Okay, so if you don't fill your canteen, that's fine, but your canteen is now going down. Now the question is, when are you going to use that water? And it's never been done this way in the past. It's always been, everybody got a fixed outflow from a project and you got so much every single day. Now we're going to all, Southern California, the ag community, we're all going to have to decide, when do we take from that canteen and when do we put in that canteen? Well, putting in that canteen has pretty much been a decision that we've had to try to formulate and put it out in an environmental document. And then we hope that the regulators will say we're being responsible here. But in terms of outflow and how it comes out, everybody has the same amount of participation. So if I'm in the reservoir for 17% of the reservoir, like the state of California is, and we all want water 1 year out of the reservoir, California gets 17% of the pipe, right? And they don't get more or any less. Hopefully someone won't need their water and they can get a bigger part of the pipeline for that period. But everyone will be treated equally on this. And I understand the environmentals. They have many times had the proverbial football pulled out from underneath them like Charlie Brown. And this is going to be operated very differently.
Well, that's a great segue back to Heather. I mean, you and I have had the conversation, and you come at these issues from a very, very different, I'll call it, non-conventional sort of water management perspective. This is not what our fathers and our grandfathers and how reservoirs and how the system was built and or operated. And it's truly kind of a forward-looking. But tell me a little bit, your perspective, how do you see operations of a facility like this being different in future years?
Yeah, so this project, I am an endangered fisheries biologist, so I do have a different perspective, I think, than a lot of different people. And what I think a lot of people don't understand, and the data shows this. So I always like to go back to the data, right? Like trust but verify. And the data actually shows that with this project, many of our fisheries will be better off. In fact, there's some recent modeling that's been done that shows that with this project, there's a 30% reduction in juvenile mortality of some salmonid species. What other measure out there, what other tool is out there where we can actually reduce juvenile mortality for our very critical salmonid fisheries? Like, that's just huge. And the interesting thing about this project, it's so different than any other, above ground storage facility that's out there, is the way it takes water off of the system. It's taking water off of the Sacramento River during the biggest events, the biggest flow events, when water is not a limiting resource for the fish. So you're taking it off when water is not a critical issue for the fish. You're storing it in this facility. And this is the part that is so fundamentally different. We're putting it back into the river system when water is a limiting resource during the dry years, during the dry times. So when we talk about putting, water down into the system out of sites, that's not just to go to, Fritz's farm or down to Southern California for urban users. It's flowing through the natural ecology of the system. It's going out into refuges. It's going out into the habitat. It's creating and benefiting habitat along the way. And that is just so different than every other, dam and reservoir that we have. But that's a critical piece of why this project is so needed, because we get to save water during the wet years for the dry years to improve not only everyone, all the people's water situation, but all the environment's water situation. And this really requires a fundamental shift in how regulators think, how the environmental communities think. And having been a former environmental regulator, I can say, we weren't really trained to manage for recovery. We were trained to regulate to prevent extinction. And there's a big difference in that, right? Like you're used to just saying you won't do this. And now it's basically giving the power and control over the 17% that is owned by the people of California to release and manage that water as the environment needs it. And they get to decide, just like any other owner of the water in the Sites Reservoir. And so that's just such a change from how the wildlife agencies have thought about, how do we really, if we have 17% of this project, how can I best release that water to improve the conditions for the species? And that's what I think is so great about it. And it's a piece that's missing from the narrative is how will this water change things for the benefit of the environment, for the benefit of the downstream environmental interests, sport fisheries, all the different industries that are out there that are really, they need a stronger fishery all throughout the system. So it's just a totally different way of doing water management in California. But I really believe that Sites Reservoir is going to be a model for the future.
Well, Jerry, I mean, I can't leave that because, we're talking about the building of trust. We're talking about looking at things on a forward perspective and doing things differently, whether it's water management, whether, as Heather just described, species, how you view species and how to thrive as opposed to how to stop degradation. I feel your pain as an executive director. Frequently, you and I are the ones that get kind of pushed out in front of the parade, almost like a piñata, to try to help, win over the hearts and minds. But talk to me a bit about how you go about in your presentations, in your public education, the utilization of your community engagement and outreach. What's the reception that you have got? Is it, people still swinging sticks, or people embracing, saying, hey, you know what? I get it. Now, how do I fit into this? Where do you see this going?
Probably. Gosh, the direction I see it going is coming together, obviously. But generally, the reaction that I get, I'd put into three categories. The first category, many reactions, and I would say from the average general public, is what is taking so long? Why can't we get this done? It should just be done already. I would say there are kind of the second category that is skeptical and wondering if this can really if Sites Reservoir could do all these great things that everybody promises. And that might be more of the people that are possibly trusting, but still very skeptical. And then I think there's the third category, which is over my dead body, and for that group, a lot of what I'm trying to do is to communicate and differentiate this from the past. This is smart storage. You look at storage that we have, Shasta, Oroville, Folsom, on the river. That was kind of brute force, audacious. And when you look at sites, I think of, words like humble, smart, simple, and more attuned with the times. We're trying to, create something that is more in tune with nature. And coming from an agency where we, like Adele, where we had off-stream storage at Los Piqueros at Contra Costa, A lot of it comes down to, in the end, convincing people and getting the trust is doing what you say you're going to do. And if you don't do that, if you don't follow through, you will never get trust. I can guarantee you of that. And I tell the board all the time that as we go forward and we make adjustments and we make changes, and by the way, I would say some on our board are not that enthused about adjusting the performance of the project to increase the environmental protections, but it's absolutely necessary. And I tell them that once you're connected to the river and once you're connected in this way, you are forever and ever interest bound to those that are protecting the salmon, and you become one of them.
Well, as we're sort of coming down to our time, there are actually really two really super critical questions that I know that I want to make sure I get on the table, because as we've talked about the benefits of storage, we talk about sites as one of those examples, the building of trust, all the things that go into this and the conversation, the negotiations, the collaboration. Two things kind of come down to the end. What's it going to cost me? I mean, because, and I have to admit, it used to be when you started talking about $1 billion, $4 billion, okay, that was real money. And then we started getting into at the federal level, trillions of dollars and the state excess of, 40 plus billions of dollars. Like, it almost speaks to why haven't you built it already? There's so much money in the system. Why? And it's until I guess we run dry, somebody's going to say, you blankety blanks, you should have. Where are we on the funding pieces? And Fritz, I'm going to ask you, and then you and Jerry both, but where are we on that financial picture? What is your current estimate? And what's the sort of the promise, given that there is unprecedented federal and state dollars that are out available, matching it then up with ratepayers? It seems like that should be relatively simple to get this now paid for.
Well, where we are today is the project looks to be around $4.2 billion. And what will that cost the individual participants? That's all going to depend on the denominator, on how much water we can put in and take out of that reservoir. And with some of the current estimates right now, we're in the over $700 range for that number. And the more you exercise it, the less your water will cost you. So in terms of what will it cost individuals, that's a rough number. How are we going to pay for that? We've actually been very fortunate. We just recently got some a WIFIA back loan. So that's a water infrastructure loan. And it's kind of like a loan guarantee. We still are going to have to pay back the money that the federal government will loan to us, but it greatly reduces the interest rates. And as we know right now with the rising interest rate environment, interest is a huge number. It can change that $700 to $800 or $900 quickly if the numbers double or triple from what we're looking at today. So we have that funding there, and we are in the next year. All the individual districts and members who are participating are going to secure their own financing, become credit worthy. Many, such as Metropolitan, are already there, but a lot of the smaller districts, we're not at that stage. So we're making great advancements here. And I'll turn, Jerry probably can address a little more of this.
So Jerry, where's the magic money tree, man?
Yeah, and I haven't found it yet. Anyway, the project is a beneficiary pays project, so everybody that benefits pays their share. And so in that way, each individual agency has to make an evaluation on its own of its cost effectiveness. But I would just want to make one point. When you talk about something as large and diverse in terms of its participation and its scale, you definitely get some advantages. And I think this is important, particularly from an affordability point of view, mostly within the urban areas. You can spread that cost a smaller cost over a larger base of customers, and therefore impact those lower income areas of your service area in a lesser way. And I think that's really critical. But the bottom line is that it's up to each individual agency to make their own cost effectiveness evaluation.
All right. Well,
Charlie,
then
I would just, could I just add one point for, at least for us, I'm sure also Adele, you know, I like to look at it and not just in terms of what does it cost, but what is the cost of doing nothing, of not having that water? And that's a big risk. So, and not just for us, but you know, what is the cost to the California economy of not having reliable water for our agriculture industry? What is the cost to our economy of not having a reliable supply in the tech hubs of our state? And I promise you that during drought conditions, Adele probably knows the number off of the top of his head, but if you're out there searching for water right now, it is not $700 an acre foot. Right. So to me, I like to look at the value of that reliable source of water in our water savings account and having that available for when times are tough. It's hard to make a case against it.
Yeah. Well, let me take you out with this because as you know, within the Southern California Water Coalition, we do two pieces here. We educate, as I like to say, to advocate, right? So if people if they have the information that they need, they will advocate in their own self-interest. And the conversation we've had today really demonstrates that this is an interest for virtually every segment of our society, whether you're an individual water customer in an urban setting, a farmer, a business, industry, labor, environmentalists, fishermen. I mean, what I heard you all describe today was this has that multi-benefit that we talk a lot about, and there's a lot of talk. So what I want to leave with comment from each of you, right? I like to make you sort of kings and queens for the day, but discussion is good, education very powerful, but what needs to happen? What action needs to take place that people can take on their own to help advance something like this, to be able to say, hey, why haven't you? You need to. What action can I take to help improve my future? So Adele, I'm going to start with you on that. What is it? What action can people take on a project like this to recognize the totality, recognize, water is very specific and it's complicated, but if I was an audience member, I'm listening to this, what do I do? Tell me what I need to do.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because I was actually surprised to know that people in Southern California still think that we're not in a drought. And that's on us. That's why we're pushing the message and the urgency now. And I'm so glad last week and the week before the media have really latched on to our actions to really say that, hey, this is not normal. And it's coming close to risking our economy, our livelihood, all that stuff. So I just, first of all, I want people to know that these are not normal conditions, normal things that we need to do something more. And it may cost more money. I mean, this is something that we need to really be real about it. The water that we're paying for, the water we're going to provide, the price is going to go up. And I think Heather said it clearly is we don't know the value of the water till we don't have it. And if we don't have it, then, willing to pay anything for it. And we're saying let's do it in a smart way, effective way. Sites is only part of the big solution. It's all of the above. And I tell people it's not either or. It's not either sites or regional recycled water projects. It's not either sites or groundwater storage and stormwater capture. It's all of the above. And this is just a tool in the toolbox, another tool. So what I'm saying is what's missing on this discussion is the environmental partners, the people that we should, sit around the table and talk to them, because that is so critical. And we need to have the dialogue. The issue with flood control and flood protection, we should focus on it. That brings people in also. There's a lot of risk on flood protection, but to me, what we need is bold action right now. We need somebody to stand up and say, this is what we need to do at the highest level in the state government to really stand up and say, we need to take action. This is an emergency action. And these are the projects, pick 5-6 projects in California that we need to build before 2030 to really help us turn the tide here. And this is one of them. Recycled water, large recycled water project down in Carson. It's the largest in the world. Maybe some remediation of work, maybe another project somewhere else in the region. But to me, we need to all speak with one voice. And I just think we need to make sure we're listening to everyone and making sure the impact of the project construction-wise, but also on the environment is addressed. And then asking the state to help fund it also. I know we're not asking for a handout, but it's really, there is a lot of benefits to the entire state. I know they're looking at some bond measure for flood protection for the Delta and the area around Sacramento, and that should be part of it. The cost should not be on the backs of water users everywhere. It should be, it's a benefit that should be paid for by somebody, and that's why I think the state should help during this time, put some more money in to help us all reduce our cost so we can manage it. Because for us and for Heather and others, we have to do more. This is not the only option we have. We have so much cost that we have to do, and it's just becoming difficult. Also, making sure that folks that are disadvantaged communities that cannot afford the cost of water are taken care of, not just temporarily, but taken care of permanently, so we can really allocate the real cost of water, not be worried about the impact. So the people that are impacted, let's help them as a state. Also, the federal government help people that similar to what we do with power. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. And this one, I think, to me, is if we all can come together and both across the board with leadership in Sacramento and say, these are the top 5 projects that we have to build by 2030 to address our livelihood and resiliency. Just stand by them. Let's define those 5, what I call bold strategic projects, and let's all stand by them and let's push for them and get people at the top of government and businesses and community partners talk about it, because we don't know the value of water until we don't have it.
Lightning round, Heather, what do you want people to do?
Recognize that water is the most critical element to life and our lifestyle in California, and to basically demand of their lawmakers that water is put on the proper position kind of in terms of their priorities. And a reliable water supply is the thing that will maintain the beautiful tapestry that is California, with all of the different elements and all of the different people and lifestyles in it. And so I just really ask that people demand of their leaders that water is placed at the top of the positioning of kind of what are our priorities, what should we be working on, what should we be investing our money in.
Jerry, aside from impersonating the governor by the same name, what can we do at this point? What would be most impactful for people to take action on?
I live by the mantra, nobody is full until we're all fed. And I think that really says a lot about how we need to act and move boldly and swiftly together.
Fritz, you get the final word. If you had the magic wand, what do you need to have happen, and what needs to happen quickly?
Well, why waste a good crisis, right? I mean, we've heard a lot of great reasons, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, our our lawmakers and people just have to realize that doing a project like this, there's risk involved, right? There's some things we probably won't get right, but let's be open-minded and be able to be adaptive in the future to correct those. But we also have to recognize that there's huge risk in continuing with our doing nothing projects. Our idea, when people just step in and say no, and they don't have good solutions, it leads us to where we are today. And I'm actually glad that Adele, his constituents are now becoming more aware of water. We in Northern California, we thought we had a good supply of water as well. And I am not growing a single acre of rice this year, as are many of my fellow farmers in my region. There's zero water. So,
well, with that, I want to say to lady and gentlemen, thank you all for bringing this issue forward. I mean, there's a lot to this, and there's more conversation for us to have. But what I heard from all of you today, we've got immediate investment opportunities. There are funds in the economy and the system. The time is now to make some pretty bold decisions and commit some of those dollars so we can put those down payments on the new mortgages, to use Adele's reference when we opened with bank accounts. I want to thank you all for being part of today's discussion. For our audience, we want to make sure they get an opportunity to hear, to be educated, and then take action on their own. And be able to reach out both to the Sites JPA and to Southern California Water Coalition if they wanted more information on this kind of activity. So thank you all for being with us. We'll be back in just a second to do a closeout on the show, just to show people exactly where to go and what they can do, and why What Matters Water TV and Podcast is important, and thank them for being part of our show today. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on What Matters Water TV and Podcast. If you like today's discussion, go to wherever you download your podcasts and give us that 5-star rating. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. That'll help us build our presence in this new world and in this format. If you're interested in helping sponsor this program, please reach out to us at socalwater.org and send us a message. And as we close out today's show, I leave you with this challenge. Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of the solution. At the Southern California Water Coalition, we educate to advocate. So as public policy leaders have difficult choices, we help them make informed decisions. Thanks for being with us. We will see you again next time on What Matters Water TV and Podcast.